My name is Ethan, and if you had asked me 6 months ago, I would have told you I had everything a man could ever want. I was 34 years old, married to the woman of my dreams, and living in a home that we had poured our hearts into. Anna and I had been together for almost 10 years, married for 5. She was the light of my life, the kind of woman who turned heads when she walked into a room, but never seemed to notice the attention she got. Our love story wasn't anything extraordinary. We met in college, fell in love quickly, and spent our 20s building a life together. Anna was warm, adventurous, and had an infectious energy that made life with her exciting. She had always been passionate about art, and while she never made a career out of it, she painted whenever she had free time. I still remember the first painting she ever gave me, a simple but striking piece of a storm rolling over the ocean. She told me it reminded her of the way she felt when she was with me, safe, even in the chaos. I worked in finance, a career that demanded long hours but provided a comfortable life. Our home was a reflection of us, a mix of modern and cozy, with walls covered in Anna's paintings and shelves filled with books we never had the time to read. We hosted dinner parties, traveled when we could, and always made time for each other. Or at least, I thought we did. From the outside, we were the perfect couple. People envied us, admired us, and often said we were the kind of love story they wanted for themselves. But what they didn't see, what I failed to see, was that the foundation of our marriage had begun to crack. The changes were subtle at first. Anna became distant, less affectionate. She used to send me texts throughout the day, little things, thinking of you, or miss you already. But those messages became rare. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just the natural ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. I made excuses. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe I had been too caught up in work. Maybe it was just a phase. But deep down, I felt it. That gnawing sensation in my gut that something was wrong. She started going out more, making vague plans with friends I had never met or heard of before. When I asked who they were, she would wave me off with a casual, just some girls from the yoga studio, or, you wouldn't know them, just old college friends. And I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust that my wife, the woman who had once cried in my arms after watching a rom-com about infidelity, would never do something like that to me. So, I ignored the signs. I told myself that I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid, that the distance I felt between us was just temporary, until I realized it wasn't. Anna wasn't just pulling away. She was slipping through my fingers, piece by piece, and I had no idea why. I wish I had known then that my world was about to fall apart, that the woman I had loved so fiercely, so completely, was about to betray me in the worst possible way. But for now, I was still in the dark, still hopeful, still blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit. The changes in Anna started off small, almost imperceptible, like a slow shift in the seasons. At first, I barely noticed them. Maybe because I didn't want to. Maybe because I had convinced myself that love, our love, was immune to decay. It wasn't until I started feeling like a stranger in my own marriage that I began to acknowledge the quiet unraveling happening before my eyes. Anna had always been a touchy, affectionate person. She would grab my hand absent-mindedly when we walked, lean into me while we watched TV, and playfully steal bites of my food at dinner. But those small intimacies disappeared. Her touch became rare, and when it did happen, it felt forced, almost rehearsed, like she was reminding herself to keep up appearances. Then there were the late nights. Anna had never been much of a night owl. She was the kind of woman who preferred cozying up in bed with a book rather than being out until the early hours of the morning. But suddenly, she was always out with friends. Drinks, dinners, impromptu get-togethers. There was always a reason to be away. I tried not to be the insecure husband. I told myself that it was normal for people to need space, that marriages go through phases where one partner leans into their independence more. I trusted her. But trust is a funny thing. It blinds you to the truth, makes you rationalize things you would never tolerate otherwise. It was a Tuesday night when I first let doubt fully creep in. I had wrapped up work early, something that almost never happened. I was excited to surprise Anna, maybe take her out for a spontaneous date night. She always used to love those. But when I got home, the house was empty. Her car was gone. I checked my phone. No messages. I assumed she was just running errands, so I decided to wait. An hour passed. Then 2. I sent her a text. Hey, where are you? No reply. By the 3rd hour, I tried calling. Straight to voicemail. That sinking feeling in my stomach, the one I had been trying so hard to ignore, finally took hold. She came home just before midnight, reeking of perfume and wine, her hair slightly tousled. When she saw me sitting on the couch, waiting, she hesitated. I studied her, searching for something. Guilt, remorse, an explanation. Hey, she said too casually. What are you doing up? I ignored the question. Where were you? She gave a slight eye roll, the kind that said I was being ridiculous. I told you, I was out with friends. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm. You didn't tell me anything, Anna. You didn't answer my calls or texts. She sighed and walked past me, dropping her purse on the table. My phone died. Relax, Ethan. My gut told me she was lying. I wanted to push, to demand answers, but something in me told me it wouldn't matter. She had already decided on the narrative, and nothing I said would change it. So, I let it go for now. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, I stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of an invisible wall between us. I wanted to reach over, to pull her into me, to feel reassured that I was wrong about everything. But I didn't, because deep down, I knew I wasn't. The unease settled into my bones like a slow poison, creeping into every thought, every moment I spent with Anna. No matter how much I tried to ignore it, to rationalize it, to pretend that everything was fine, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping away. My marriage, once the center of my world, now felt like an unfamiliar place, a hollow structure built on memories that no longer felt real. I had been blind to the changes at first, dismissing them as a phase, a byproduct of stress, but the truth had a way of making itself known no matter how tightly you shut your eyes. Anna had always been open with her phone, never the type to keep secrets. She used to leave it lying around, face up, unlocked, unguarded. If I needed to check the time or look something up, she never hesitated to hand it over. But lately, her phone had become an extension of her, always clutched in her hand, face down when placed on a table, tucked away in her purse when she thought I wasn't looking. She silenced notifications when I was near, turned her body away while texting, and I caught glimpses of that barely there smirk, a ghost of amusement reserved for something, or someone, I was no longer a part of. It was a small change, subtle, easy to overlook, but I noticed. I noticed everything. At night, the distance between us grew in ways I never imagined possible. She had always been the one to reach for me first, curling into my side, stealing my warmth, her presence a comfort I had come to rely on. Now, she turned away, creating an invisible barrier between us. When I reached for her, my touch was met with tension, her body stiffening under my hand. Excuses became her weapon. Too tired, too stressed, not in the mood, each one cutting deeper than the last. I told myself it was temporary, that maybe she was dealing with something she wasn't ready to share, so I tried to bridge the gap. I suggested a weekend away, just the two of us, time to reconnect, to remember who we were before life got in the way. Her reaction cut me deeper than any truth I was still refusing to face. She barely looked up from her phone when she scoffed, her voice laced with irritation. God, Ethan, why are you being so clingy? I just have a lot going on right now. I don't need you hovering. Hovering. That's what I had become to her. An annoyance, a presence she barely tolerated. I felt pathetic. I felt discarded. I felt like a fool clinging to a love that no longer existed. That night, I stayed at the office long after my work was done, sitting in an empty conference room, staring at the walls, wondering when exactly I had lost my wife. Then came the moment that shattered any illusions I had left. Saturday morning, I woke up early. Anna was still asleep, her breathing soft and even, her body turned away from mine. Her phone was on the nightstand, charging, its screen dark and silent. Without thinking, I reached for it. I wasn't looking for evidence, not yet. I just wanted reassurance, proof that I was wrong, that my paranoia was unfounded. The screen lit up before I could even touch it. Can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again? My stomach clenched so violently that I thought I might be sick. My eyes locked onto the message, my entire body frozen. The sender's name was nothing more than a single letter, D. It was vague, intentional, a half-hearted attempt at secrecy that only confirmed the betrayal I had been desperately trying to deny. The words on the screen burned into my mind, each letter a wound deeper than the last. I sat there, motionless, my breathing slow and controlled even as my heart pounded in my ears. I could have woken her up right then. I could have shoved the phone in her face and demanded answers. I could have screamed, shattered the fragile pretense she was still maintaining. But I didn't. I wasn't thinking about confrontation. I was thinking about something far more important. I needed more. More proof. More information. More time to figure out exactly what I was going to do. I set her phone back down carefully, as if it might explode in my hands, and forced myself to stand. My legs felt heavy, my movements mechanical as I walked into the bathroom, turned on the shower, and let the scalding water burn away the chill that had settled over me. When I stepped out, Anna was still asleep, unaware that her carefully hidden secrets had begun to unravel. I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and left the house before she even stirred. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not yet. The moment I saw that message, something inside me shifted. The uncertainty, the self-doubt, the desperate attempts to convince myself that I was imagining things. All of it vanished. In its place was a cold, unwavering resolve. I was done being blind. I was done making excuses. I was done pretending that the woman lying next to me was still my wife. I left the house without a word, needing space, needing air, needing to think. I drove aimlessly for hours, the city passing by in a blur of lights and motion, but all I could see was that message. It repeated in my mind like a sick mantra, each word digging deeper into my gut. Can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again? I knew what it meant. There was no misunderstanding it, no innocent explanation that could make it anything other than what it was. She had betrayed me, and worse, she didn't even care enough to hide it properly. By the time I pulled into an empty parking lot, the sun had fully risen, but I felt like I was trapped in the longest night of my life. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. My jaw clenched so hard it ached. I wanted to rage, to break something, to scream, but none of it would change the truth. Anna was cheating on me, and now I needed to know with whom. That single letter, D. was the only clue I had. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I thought about our social circle, her friends, co-workers, anyone she had been spending time with lately. No one came to mind immediately, but I knew where to start. When I got home, Anna was awake, sitting at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee as if nothing had changed. She barely glanced at me when I walked in, her expression unreadable. Did she know? Had she seen me look at her phone? If she did, she gave no sign of it. Her indifference infuriated me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I played the part of the oblivious husband. I asked her how she slept, pretended like nothing was wrong. I even kissed her on the forehead before heading to my office, just to see if she would flinch. She didn't. If anything, she seemed relieved, as if she believed I was still blind to what she had done. That made two of us then, because now I was playing a game of my own. I started digging. I installed a keylogger on our shared laptop, checking to see if she had been using it to communicate with whoever D. was. I checked our phone records, combing through texts and call logs, looking for unfamiliar numbers. I even started watching her more closely, paying attention to every move she made. She thought she was being careful. She wasn't careful enough. Over the next few days, I gathered more pieces of the puzzle. She would leave the house at odd hours, claiming she had errands to run or that she was meeting up with a friend. She always made sure to leave her phone behind, knowing that if I called, she could later claim she hadn't seen it. When she returned, there was a subtle change in her demeanor. She was lighter, almost giddy, like a woman freshly in love. But when she looked at me, that light dimmed. Then, finally, I found what I was looking for. Our home security system had cameras installed throughout the house, but I had never needed to review the footage before. It was meant for safety, for peace of mind, not for spying. But now, It was my only lifeline to the truth. The first time I checked the footage, I saw nothing unusual. The second time, the same. But on the third day, while scrolling through the video history, I found something that made my stomach turn to ice. Anna had come home in the middle of the day while I was at work. She was dressed up, more than usual, more than she ever did for me. She checked her reflection in the mirror, fixed her hair, smoothed down her dress. Then, she moved toward the front door and opened it. And in walked him. I froze, my eyes locked onto the screen, my pulse hammering in my ears. The man stepped inside, and as he did, Anna reached for him, pulling him close. Their lips met instantly, urgently, without hesitation. Her hands tangled in his hair, his gripped her waist. They moved together in a way that told me this wasn't new, wasn't hesitant, wasn't a mistake. I felt like I was going to be sick. Then, the man pulled back slightly, giving me my first clear look at his face. My world shattered all over again. Because standing there, in my home, kissing my wife, was the last person I ever expected. My father. There are moments in life that redefine everything you thought you knew. Moments that take the reality you've built and shatter it into a million jagged pieces, leaving you standing in the wreckage with no idea how to move forward. Watching the footage of my wife with my father was one of those moments. My hands were shaking as I stared at the screen, my breathing slow and measured, the kind of stillness that comes right before an explosion. I played the video again, forcing myself to absorb every second of it, to commit it to memory, to leave no room for denial or misinterpretation. There they were, in my house, standing just beyond my front door. Their bodies pressed together in a way that made my stomach twist with revulsion. Anna's hands slid up his chest, her fingers tangling in his hair as she pulled him in, their lips meeting in a kiss that was neither hesitant nor uncertain. It was practiced, familiar. The way two people kiss when they know every inch of each other, when they have done this before. Again and again and again. I gripped the edge of my desk, my knuckles going white as I fought the overwhelming urge to destroy everything in front of me. My father, my own father, had his hands on my wife, gripping her hips with the ease of a man who had claimed what was mine, who had stood in my home and defiled everything I had worked so hard to build. Anna leaned into him, her body pressing against his like it was the most natural thing in the world, like she belonged to him instead of me. They whispered something to each other, words I couldn't hear but didn't need to. The way she smiled at him, the way he smirked down at her, the way they moved together. It told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't some fleeting mistake. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. This was planned. I forced myself to keep watching. My entire body coiled so tightly with rage that I could feel my pulse pounding in my skull. They moved further into the house, walking with the kind of ease that suggested this wasn't the first time. Anna led him to the living room, her hand sliding down his arm in a slow, teasing motion before she pulled him onto the couch. I watched as she settled onto his lap, her arms draped around his shoulders, their bodies pressed together in a way that made me feel physically ill. She kissed him again, slow and deep, like she was savoring him, like he was something she had longed for. I should have stopped watching. I should have looked away, but I couldn't. I needed to see. I needed to know exactly how deep this betrayal went. And then, just when I thought I couldn't possibly feel any worse, I saw the moment that broke me completely. My father pulled back slightly, cupping her face in his hands, and murmured something against her lips. It was soft, affectionate, the kind of thing a man says to a woman he adores. Anna smiled. God. She smiled, and laughed lightly before responding. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read her lips well enough. I love you. I slammed my laptop shut so hard that the screen flickered, my entire body rigid with a rage, so intense I could barely contain it. Anna hadn't just betrayed me. She hadn't just cheated. She had fallen in love with my father. The weight of it crashed down on me, an unbearable pressure that made it hard to breathe. My mind raced, trying to piece together the timeline, trying to understand how long this had been going on. Had it started recently? Had it been happening for months? Years? Had this been festering beneath the surface while I went about my life, oblivious to the rot growing in my own home? The realization hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. This wasn't just about lust. This wasn't some meaningless affair. She had chosen him over me. She had given him the kind of love and affection that had been missing from our marriage for months, and now I knew why. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms as I forced myself to think rationally. I couldn't react, not yet. I couldn't storm into the house and confront her, screaming and demanding answers that wouldn't change anything. I needed to be smart. I needed to plan. If I lost control now, I would give them the advantage. No, I needed to let them think they had gotten away with it. I needed to gather more evidence, to make sure that when I finally struck, I would destroy them both. For the first time since discovering the truth, a sense of calm settled over me, a dark and dangerous stillness that came with clarity. I wasn't just going to expose them. I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to make them pay. And when I was done, neither of them would ever recover from what I had planned. I sat back in my chair, my breathing steady, my mind already calculating my next move. This wasn't the end of my story. This was just the beginning. I spent the rest of the day in a state of controlled rage, every fiber of my being screaming for action, for confrontation, for revenge. But I knew better than to act on impulse. The fire burning inside me was dangerous, but I wouldn't let it consume me. I would wield it, harness it, shape it into a weapon so sharp that when I finally struck, it would cut them both to the bone. Anna and my father had already made their moves, played their game in secrecy, thinking they were clever, thinking I was blind. Now it was my turn. I took a deep breath and forced myself to think clearly, to plan every step with precision. This wouldn't just be about exposing them. It wouldn't just be about making them feel the humiliation and pain they had inflicted on me. I wanted to destroy them both in a way that left nothing behind. I started by securing the footage, backing it up onto multiple encrypted drives. I didn't need this evidence for court. Divorce laws in my state didn't require proof of infidelity, but I needed it for something far more important. I needed it to ensure that neither of them could ever twist the narrative in their favor, that when the moment came, there would be no room for denials, no pathetic excuses, no rewriting of history. Next, I turned to our home security system. I had access to the cameras, but I wanted more. I wanted a live feed. I wanted to see in real time when they met, what they did, what lies they whispered to each other. It didn't take long to set up remote access, allowing me to monitor everything from my phone. Then, I went a step further. I ordered hidden cameras, the kind used for home surveillance, small and undetectable. If they thought they could use my home as their playground, they would do so under my watchful eye. But gathering evidence wasn't enough. I needed to take my revenge further, to turn this into something they would never recover from. The first step was making them comfortable, letting them believe they had one. If I acted normal, if I pretended to be the same clueless husband and son they had deceived for God knows how long, they would let their guard down. They would slip up. And when they did, I would be ready. I started with Anna. That night, when I came home, I kissed her. She hesitated at first, her body stiffening as if she feared I knew something. But then she relaxed, likely convincing herself that I was still oblivious. I told her I had been thinking about our relationship, that I missed her, that I wanted us to work on our marriage. I suggested we spend more time together, take a weekend trip, reconnect like we used to. I watched as guilt flickered across her face, a brief, almost imperceptible moment where she faltered, where the weight of her actions must have pressed down on her. But she recovered quickly, giving me a soft smile, agreeing like she was actually considering it. I almost laughed. She was going to lose everything, and she had no idea. But Anna wasn't my real target. No, the real betrayal, the one that made my blood boil, the one that turned my stomach to ice, came from my father, my own flesh and blood, the man who had raised me, who had stood beside me through every stage of my life, had looked me in the eye for months, maybe years, while sleeping with my wife. I needed to make sure that when I took him down, I did so in a way that he could never recover from. So, I played the dutiful son. The next evening, I called him. I asked him to grab a drink with me, just like old times. His voice carried no trace of guilt, no sign of hesitation. He was calm, casual, even warm, as if he weren't actively destroying his own son's life. That fact alone only fueled my determination. We met at a bar we used to go to when I was younger, back when I idolized him, back when I thought he was the kind of man I wanted to be. Sitting across from him now, I realized how foolish I had been. He was charismatic, charming, effortlessly likable, the kind of man who could lie to your face and make you thank him for it. I pretended to confide in him, telling him I had been feeling distant from Anna lately, that I was worried, that I didn't know what to do. I watched him closely, waiting for any crack in his facade, any sign that he felt even a shred of remorse. But he played his role well. He nodded, offered vague words of advice, told me that relationships go through rough patches, that I just needed to work at it. I wanted to punch him right then and there, to smash his face into the bar counter, to make him feel something for what he had done. But that would be too easy. That would be too merciful. Instead, I smiled, thanked him for the advice, and told him I was going to do whatever it took to fix my marriage. I told him I had been planning a surprise for Anna, that I wanted to remind her of the man she had fallen in love with. I played the role of the desperate husband, the fool still clinging to the illusion of love, and I saw the amusement in his eyes. He actually enjoyed this, knowing he had taken something from me. That was the moment I knew there would be no second chances, no possibility of forgiveness. My father was beyond saving. And now, I had no reason to hold back. By the time I left the bar, my plan was set in motion. I would gather every last piece of evidence I needed. I would let them continue their disgusting little affair, believing they were untouchable. I would make them comfortable. And then, when they least expected it, I would burn their entire world to the ground. They thought they had taken everything from me. They had no idea what was coming. Patience is not something that comes naturally in moments like these. Every instinct in me screamed to act, to confront them, to tear my father and my wife apart with my bare hands. But I knew better. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about destruction, about making sure that when I was done, there was nothing left for them to salvage. I had already gathered the footage of their betrayal, but I wanted more. I wanted every detail, every meeting, every whisper they exchanged behind my back. I needed them to believe they had won, to feel so safe, so secure in their treachery, that they would be reckless. Because when people feel untouchable, they make mistakes. And when they made theirs, I would be ready. I continued my charade with Anna, keeping up the facade of a devoted, clueless husband. I played the part so well that even I almost believed it sometimes. I brought her flowers, planned small date nights, acted as though I were a man desperate to save his marriage. She responded with just enough guilt-ridden affection to keep up appearances, but it was empty. I could see it now. The way she kissed me without feeling. The way she touched me like it was an obligation. It disgusted me to let her hands linger on me, knowing they had been all over my father, but I endured it because I had to. Because the longer I let this play out, the harder they would fall. I took things a step further with my father, making sure he still saw me as nothing more than the son he had successfully deceived. I invited him to lunch, talked about work, asked him for advice. Anything to keep him believing that I was still blind. The sick part was how easy it was for him to lie to my face, to sit across from me as if he hadn't betrayed everything a father was supposed to be. I listened to his bullshit, his half-hearted wisdom about marriage, his fake concern for my well-being. And I smiled through it all, knowing that soon, he wouldn't be able to look me in the eyes without feeling his entire world collapse. I monitored the cameras daily, logging every visit, every interaction, every intimate moment between them. The audacity of it was almost laughable. How they acted like I was some oblivious idiot. How they carried on as if I didn't exist the moment I left the house. They thought they were being careful, that their little secret was safe, but they had no idea I was watching their every move. I could hear them whispering, their pathetic conversations about how guilty they felt, how they wished they could be together openly, how they hated lying to me. I clenched my fists every time I heard them say my name, every time Anna talked about me like I was some obstacle in the way of her happiness. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, the moment that would solidify their downfall. One night, after I had left home under the pretense of a late meeting, I watched the cameras as my father arrived, just like clockwork. But this time, they weren't just reckless, they were careless. They sat in my living room, drinking wine, laughing like this was just another night for them. Then, Anna pulled out her phone, and she started recording. I sat up, my pulse spiking as I watched her turn the camera toward my father. She was smiling, her expression one of excitement, of love, as she whispered to him. "I just want something to remember this by," she said, pressing against him, nuzzling into his neck. He chuckled, kissed her forehead, and pulled her closer. And that was it. The final piece of evidence I needed. They had just made a recording of their affair, and now it was mine. I intercepted the footage the moment she uploaded it to her phone, backing it up onto my private storage before deleting it from her device. She wouldn't even know it was gone, but I had it. A video of their betrayal, undeniable, irrefutable proof of their disgusting relationship. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly, my hands steady, my mind sharper than ever. They had just handed me everything I needed. Now, it was time for the next phase of my plan. I was going to cheat on Anna, with her own mother, and when I was done, I was going to throw her out like the trash she was. There is a moment in every act of revenge when the weight of what you are about to do settles into your bones. A moment when you fully commit, when there is no turning back, when the anger that has been simmering beneath the surface ignites into something unstoppable. I had spent weeks playing the part of the loving husband, the oblivious son, the fool they thought they had deceived. I had gathered my evidence, watched them betray me in my own home, heard their whispers about how wrong this was while they continued anyway. And now, it was time for me to make my move. Sleeping with Anna's mother wasn't just about revenge, it was about humiliation. Anna had spent God knows how long sneaking around with my father, lying to my face, making me feel like an idiot. She had convinced herself she was clever, that she was getting away with it, that she had the upper hand. I wanted her to feel what I had felt. I wanted her to know that every time she had smiled at me, kissed me, told me she loved me, I had already been planning her downfall, and I wanted to make sure that when I ruined her, she would never recover from it. Anna's mother, Margaret, was in her late 50s but had aged gracefully. She carried herself with confidence, elegance, everything Anna lacked. I had always been close with my mother-in-law, and in the past, I had never thought of her as anything more than family. But now, I saw her as a weapon, and I was going to wield her mercilessly. The first step was easy, planting the seed. I started calling Margaret more often, checking in, telling her I wanted to talk about my troubles with Anna. She had always been supportive of our marriage, had always been the type to offer advice, to insist that communication was key. She had no idea I already knew the truth. I told her that Anna had been distant, that I was worried about our relationship, that I wanted to make things right but didn't know how. She ate it up, eager to help, eager to be the voice of reason. Then, I started visiting her. I made sure to drop by when I knew Anna wouldn't be around, bringing flowers, small gifts, little things that made it clear that I saw her. Margaret had been single for years, having divorced Anna's father long before I had entered the picture. She was lonely, whether she admitted it or not, and I played on that. I made her feel special, appreciated, desired. I could see it in the way she looked at me, the way her eyes lingered just a little too long, the way her hand would brush against mine when she laughed. It was almost too easy. The night I set my plan in motion, I made sure Anna was busy. She had been spending more and more nights with my father, feeding me lies about dinner with friends, or late shifts at work. I didn't call her out. I didn't ask questions. I simply told her I'd be home late myself. She didn't even seem to care. I showed up at Margaret's house with a bottle of wine, telling her I just needed someone to talk to. She welcomed me in with open arms, pouring us both a glass, sitting beside me on the couch, listening intently as I fed her every lie I had prepared. I told her that I felt unloved, that Anna no longer looked at me the way she used to, that I feared she was slipping away. Margaret reached for my hand, squeezing it gently, reassuring me that things could still be fixed. I shook my head, looking down, my voice soft, broken. I just don't think she loves me anymore. Margaret hesitated, her grip tightening around my hand. I looked up at her, meeting her gaze, letting my pain, my real pain, shine through. She exhaled slowly, sadness flickering in her eyes. Then, something shifted. I saw it in the way she swallowed hard, in the way she licked her lips, in the way her body leaned just slightly closer to mine. I didn't have to do much after that. She kissed me, and I let her. Margaret was eager, desperate, the loneliness she had buried for years surfacing in full force. She melted into me, her hands trembling as they roamed over my body, as if she couldn't believe this was happening. And I gave her everything. I kissed her like she was the only woman in the world, touched her like she was something precious, made her feel wanted in a way no man had in years. And then, I made sure Anna would find out. I left subtle traces, my jacket draped over Margaret's chair, a familiar cologne lingering in her home. But the final blow came when I sent Anna a text, by accident. I had an amazing night. I haven't felt this alive in years. Then, I waited. It didn't take long. Anna called me within minutes, her voice sharp, demanding. "Who was that meant for?" she snapped, her tone laced with suspicion. I let a silence stretch between us, long enough for her mind to start racing, long enough for doubt to creep in. Then, I exhaled heavily. "Anna, we need to talk." I could hear her panic, the way she sucked in a breath, the way she stiffened on the other end of the line. She knew. She didn't know who, not yet, but she knew something had happened, and that was enough. When I finally came home, she was waiting. Her arms were crossed, her jaw clenched, her entire body radiating fury. "Who is she?" she demanded, her voice shaking. I didn't answer right away. I let her stew in it, let the silence eat away at her. Then, finally, I spoke. Calm, measured, deliberate. "You don't get to ask me that." Her expression faltered, confusion flashing across her face. "What?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You don't get to ask me who I've been with. Not when you've been screwing my father behind my back." Anna went pale. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked like she had been slapped, her entire body frozen in place. I let the moment hang, let the truth settle into her bones, let her realize that her perfect little secret was no longer a secret at all. Then, I dropped the final bomb. "And if you want to know who she is, why don't you call your mother and ask her?" Anna staggered back like I had physically struck her. Her breath hitched, her face twisting in horror as the meaning of my words crashed over her. I had done to her what she had done to me, only worse. I didn't wait for her to respond. I turned, walked to the door, and opened it wide. "Get out." She didn't move at first. She just stood there, her mouth opening and closing, trying to form words, trying to process what had just happened. Then, without another word, she grabbed her purse, stormed past me, and disappeared into the night. I stood there for a long time after she was gone, staring at the empty doorway, feeling nothing but satisfaction. She had destroyed our marriage. I had destroyed her entire world, and I had never felt better in my life. The silence that followed Anna's departure was almost deafening. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, the house felt like mine again. No more whispered lies, no more hidden betrayals, no more pretending that I was the fool they thought I was. I stood in the doorway for a long time, staring at the empty driveway, letting the weight of what had just happened settle in my chest. I expected to feel something, guilt, regret, maybe even doubt, but all I felt was satisfaction. I had taken back control. I had delivered my revenge in a way that she would never recover from. And the best part? This was only the beginning. I poured myself a drink and sat down in the living room, the very same spot where Anna and my father had shamelessly indulged in their affair. The thought of them, wrapped up in each other in my own home, used to fill me with a rage so strong it threatened to consume me. But now, all I could do was smirk, because whatever fleeting happiness they had found in their stolen moments was now shattered. Anna was out of my house, her world crumbling around her. She had no idea where to turn, no idea what to do next. And my father? His reckoning was still to come. The first call came less than an hour later. I saw Anna's name flash across my screen, but I didn't answer. She called again, and again. By the fourth attempt, she gave up and left a voicemail. I let it sit there, untouched, the weight of her desperation lingering in the air. I already knew what it would say. "We need to talk. I can explain. Please, just let me explain." Explain what, exactly? That she had spent God knows how long betraying me? That she had chosen my father of all people? that she had looked me in the eye every day and lied without hesitation? There was nothing left to explain. Instead, I turned my attention to the second phase of my plan, my father. I wanted to savor this moment, to drag out his suffering the way he had unknowingly dragged out mine. But I also wanted him to feel it, the moment when his entire world began to crumble. And I had the perfect way to make that happen. I sent him a text, simple and direct. "We need to talk, face to face." He replied almost immediately. "Of course, son. What's wrong?" The audacity of it. The way he played the concerned father. The way he still spoke to me like nothing had changed. If I had any doubts about how little remorse he felt, they were gone now. I told him to meet me at his house the next evening. I wanted him to have time to wonder, to stew in the possibility that something was off. I wanted him nervous. And more than anything, I wanted him alone. The next morning, I finally listened to Anna's voicemail, not because I cared about what she had to say, but because I wanted to hear the panic in her voice. And it was there, clear as day. The shakiness, the desperation, the realization that she had lost control. "Ethan, please. I know you're angry, but we need to talk." "I swear it wasn't." She hesitated, her breath hitching. "I don't know why you did what you did, but you don't have to do this. We can fix this. Just please call me back." Fix this? Was she really that delusional? I deleted the voicemail without a second thought. By the time I arrived at my father's house that evening, I was ready. I had played my part perfectly. I had let them believe they were untouchable. Now, I was about to rip the rug out from under him. My father greeted me at the door with his usual warm smile, the same smile I had once trusted without question. It made me sick just looking at him. "Come in, son," he said, patting me on the back like nothing was wrong. I stepped inside, letting the door click shut behind me. "We need to talk," I said, my voice calm, steady. He led me to the living room, where we sat across from each other, the way we had done so many times before. But this time, I wasn't here for advice. I wasn't here for support. I was here to end him. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my files, and selected the one that mattered most. I hit play and turned the screen toward him. The video started. Anna, my father, in my home, tangled together, kissing, touching, whispering things they thought no one else would ever hear. The color drained from his face almost instantly. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His hands, once so steady, trembled as he reached for the phone, as if touching it would somehow make it disappear. "What is this?" he finally choked out, his voice barely above a whisper. I leaned forward, my eyes locked onto his. "You tell me, Dad." Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. He swallowed hard, his mind scrambling for an explanation, for a lie that could somehow undo what I had just shown him. But there was nothing he could say. "Ethan, I can explain." I cut him off with a laugh, cold, humorless. "No, you can't." He ran a hand over his face, exhaling sharply, his composure slipping by the second. "It wasn't, son. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Save it." My voice was sharp, final. "I don't want to hear your excuses. I don't want to hear how it just happened, or how you never meant to hurt me. You did, over and over again. And now, you're going to deal with the consequences." His breathing was uneven now, panic setting in. What do you want?" he asked, his voice laced with fear. I smirked, leaning back in my seat. "Oh, you'll find out soon enough." I let the weight of my words sink in before standing up. He didn't move, didn't try to stop me as I walked toward the door. But just as I reached it, I turned back one last time. "By the way," I said casually, "you might want to check your email. I sent that video to a few people who might find it interesting." The blood drained from his face entirely. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me with a sense of finality. The fallout had begun, and I wasn't done yet. By the time I got home, my phone was already buzzing with calls and messages. My father, Anna, even a few extended family members, each one desperate to contain the wildfire I had ignited. I ignored them all. I knew exactly what was happening. The video had spread. My father's reputation was in ruins. Anna was likely in a full-blown meltdown, realizing that her world had crumbled overnight. I checked my emails, scanning through the responses. My father's colleagues had seen it. His friends. Even distant relatives. The man who had spent his entire life crafting the image of a respectable family man was now nothing more than a disgrace. There would be no coming back from this. His career was over. His social circle would never look at him the same way again. He had betrayed his own son, and now he was paying the price. Anna, on the other hand, was unraveling in a different way. She showed up at my house the next morning, pounding on the door, screaming for me to let her in. When I finally opened it, her face was streaked with tears, her body trembling. "You ruined me," she choked out, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, Anna," I said calmly, watching the realization dawn in her eyes. "You ruined yourself." I shut the door in her face, her sobs echoing through the empty hallway. The revenge was complete. A week later, the dust had settled, but the damage remained permanent. My father had gone into hiding, his life as he knew it destroyed. Anna had lost everything. Her marriage, her dignity, her reputation. Word had spread fast, and she was now a pariah, shunned by friends and family alike. She had tried to reach out to Margaret, but her own mother had cut her off completely. As for me, I was free. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. The house no longer felt tainted. My future, once clouded by betrayal, was now wide open. I had taken back my life, on my terms, and I had no regrets. One evening, as I sat on my porch with a drink in hand, I got a final message from my father. Was it worth it? I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing my response. Every second, I hit send, then blocked his number. Some betrayals can never be forgiven. Some wounds never heal. And some people, they deserve everything they get.